Right, okay, everyone. Okay, Dave, bring in the effects.
Okay, Tim.
That's nice. Hold it, Dave. Ah, Dimitri, you made it.
I'm not late.
No, you just got started.
How are you?
Very well, nice to see you.
Still got your tennis,
Oh, of course. Remember James, who's playing Hamilton?
Nice to see you again.
And this is Richard, who plays Hunt.
Hi. How are you? You remember our esteemed director, of course, playing Lord Elgin.
Well, thanks very much, Richard.
Where's Sally?
I've no idea, but her ladyship is late, as usual.
Wardour Street, please, and hurry. I'm terribly late.
I'll do my best.
Right. Okay, Dave, ready for a level?
Okay.
1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay.
Okay, stand by, Dimitri. Roll film. In your own time, Dimitri.
The Parthenon was begun in 447 BC and finished only 9 years later. Phidias, the great sculptor, supervised the whole undertaking with the architects Callicrates and Ictinus. This miracle was accomplished because of Pericles, who ruled Athens during this golden age of Greece. It was the first Doric temple to have 8 columns supporting the pediment and to use the geometric architectural refinements to give an optical impression of beauty and lightness. The temple has always stood as the symbol of Greece, the cradle of Western civilization, as important to Greeks as, say, Westminster Abbey to the British, or the first Senate House in Pennsylvania to the Americans.
Well done, Dimitri.
Thank you.
Now, look, while we're waiting for Sally, let's do the same section again in Greek.
All right.
Okay.
That's it.
Whenever you're ready, Dimitri.
Thank you. Ο Παρθενώνας άρχισε να χτίζεται το 447 π.Χ. και τέλειωσε 9 χρόνια αργότερα. Ο Φιδίας, ο περίφημος γλύπτης, είχε τη γενική επίβλεψη του έργου μαζί με τους μεγάλους αρχιτέκτονες Καλικράτη και Ικτή. Το θαύμα αυτό έγινε χάρη στον...
Cut the film.
Bloody train. Hello, Dimitri.
Hello, Sally.
I'm so sorry.
It's all right, Sally. You're only 15 minutes late. It's all right. Sit down, okay? Okay, everyone, let's concentrate, shall we? Okay, run the film.
Originally, the Parthenon was decorated with metopes, sculptured marble panels around the top walls, which were placed between triple-fluted motifs called triglyphs. And inside was the frieze carved by Phidias. These wonderful sculptures are now called by the British at least the Elgin marbles, after the man who took them from the place they were designed to grace. The Earl of Elgin and Kincarding, after his father had died, pulled down the family house built by the great architect Robert Adam. The new house, designed by Thomas Harrison, with its fittings and decoration, was to obsess Elgin for the rest of his life. It would also lead to the bankruptcy and ruin of Elgin himself. He was already in debt in 1799, but he became instantly solvent again when he married the beautiful and wealthy heiress, Mary Nesbit, who lived nearby in Scotland. Lord Elgin promised Mary the magnificent new house, which was to be called Broom Hall, as a wedding gift. And the chance to make it even finer came when he met George III at Brighton and managed to engineer for himself the appointment as ambassador extraordinary to the court of Selim III, Sultan of Turkey. From his capital at Constantinople, Selim ruled over the still great, though ailing, Ottoman Empire. Turkey was the sick old man of Europe, and the struggle for the old empire began between Britain and France. Britain dominated at sea, France on the land. Napoleon occupied Italy and attacked Egypt, so there was war between France and Turkey. Turkey asked Britain for help. Elgin's arrival on this scene was ultimately to prove very timely. Every young man of position wanted to go on a grand European tour. Athens had become even more important than Rome since Napoleon occupied Italy. Stuart and Rivette's engravings of the antiquities of Athens had already been published 20 years before. So when Thomas Harrison, the architect of Broom Hall, learned of his client's new post as ambassador, he urged him to add to his staff artists and molders so that he could bring back from Greece records of buildings and sculptures which could be copied to decorate the house. Records and copies, not the objects themselves.
Architrave on the western end of a frieze enriched with sculpture, which is continued quite round the temple. Quite superb.
Before the long sea journey to Constantinople, Elgin collected his staff. Amongst them, his secretary, William Hamilton, 23, educated at Oxford and Cambridge, and his chaplain, the ambitious but impoverished Philip Hunt.
Gentlemen, we have the most serious duties to perform. I have here my instructions from the Foreign Office. I will not read it all, but this is the heart. We must keep vigilant watch over the interests of His Majesty, promote commerce, maintain British privileges, persuade the Turks to open the Black Sea to English trade, establish a postal station at Suez. But above all, we must assist in every possible way to expel the French from Egypt and thus to keep the Ottoman Empire on friendly terms with Great Britain.
But those instructions didn't say anything about nicking half the Parthenon.
I know, but did you know that he actually tried to get the government to pay for all those artists and moulders that he'd sent Hamilton off to recruit from Italy? And then he was surprised when they said no.
So poor old Elgin had to pay for them out of his own pocket.
Oh, out of Lady Elgin's pocket, more likely.
Ready money for a countess's coronet was a perfectly fair exchange at that time. I think it's very dodgy applying modern values to all this.
Maybe Lady Elgin was ahead of her time. After all, it was ultimately her efforts that got the marbles home to England.
So, with favorable winds at the end of October, they reached the coast of Turkey. And on the 7th of November, 1799, they arrived in Constantinople.
Right, well, I've assembled and dubbed the journey to Constantinople, dinner with Nelson, Lady Hamilton, etc., etc.
Can't we see all that?
No, I'm afraid not, James. We haven't got the time. Page 10, everyone. It includes you, Richard.
Page 10.
In the script. Right. That's the Ashmack scene. Now, Dimitri, stand by for your commentary. And Sally, you be ready to voice over Lady Elgin's first letter when I cue it.
Okay.
Right.
After the trials of the long sea journey, there was time for relaxation and play. Lady Elgin wrote this letter to her mother.
When I was dressed, the Captain Pasha came in and told me Eggy had arrived. To my great delight, Eggy absolutely did not know me at first sight. All the women said I was excessively like the Sultan's favorite. You can't think how much the Captain Pasha enjoyed it.
At this time, the Acropolis, above the little town of Athens, was controlled by a governor called the Voivod, who represented the Sultan in Constantinople. Under him was the Dizdar, who was the military commander of the fortress on the Acropolis. The Voivod let the British play, but he was becoming tougher on the French. After the first French capitulation in Cairo, the situation had become more favorable in Athens for Elgin, as the then French consul, Louis Fauvel, was imprisoned by the Turks along with all French subjects in the Ottoman Empire.
Seni sultanın adına tutukluyorum. Benimle gel.
3 years earlier, Choiseul Gouffier, his ambassador in Constantinople, had written to Fauvel saying,
Grab everything you can. Don't lose any opportunity to snatch in Athens and in the neighborhood everything that you can lay your hands on. Have no pity either for the living or the dead.
So the way was now clear in Athens for the arrival of Elgin's band of Italian artists, whom he had instructed his secretary, William Hamilton, to collect in Italy. When Luisieri, who was the head of his team, arrived with Hamilton in Athens, they were welcomed by their British consul, Spiridon Logothetis, in whose house, near the Parthenon, they could store the moldings and drawings. Elgin gave his instructions to Hamilton.
My dear Hamilton, I require, 1, a man for casts, a painter for figures, to be under Luisieri, their work to be entirely my property, and their labor at my disposal, at a fixed salary, say about £50 per annum. 2, to procure materials for the painters and casts. 3, to get a musician capable of perfectly teaching and accompanying the pianoforte. It would be wished that he occasionally appeared as a groom of the chamber as well. No doubt about getting these additional men, as long as they are prepared to wear livery and be his servants.
The British consul was soon to write to Lord Elgin about their immediate problems, as the Italians were having difficulties in starting work on the Parthenon. Lady Elgin read the letter to her ailing husband.
With reference to the Parthenon, Your Excellency must be aware that inasmuch as Turkish families live round it, when the scaffoldings are made, all the Turkish houses and courts will be in view. And since Muslims do not allow their women to be seen, we shall meet with difficulties. A letter, therefore, or a firman, is needed addressed to the Voivode, which commends the artists and myself and allows us access onto the Acropolis and its temples. This letter should be accompanied by 100 piastres to the Dizdar, and another 100 to the neighboring Turks would serve. Dear Mother and Father, poor Eggy has been very ill with a violent rheumatism in his head for 3 days past. Dreadful pain. The doctor put 7 leeches on his temples last night, which I hoped would have relieved him, but he is still in great agony. The doctor says he never saw such leeches in his life, so very violent. They bite much more than he ever saw in England. Your dutiful and very affectionate daughter, Mary Elgin, the ambassadress, very extraordinary.
While awaiting the firman, or permit, from Lord Elgin, the only way Luisieri could begin work on the Parthenon was by giving large financial bribes to the Dizdar. These engravings of Elgin's team at work on the Acropolis were done by a British artist at the time called Atkins.
My lord, the molders were ready to begin work on the Parthenon in the citadel when the commandant prevented their going on. The same cause prevents Ivanovich from drawing the bas-reliefs of the same temple, the architects from making new observations, and myself from taking views. That is because they lack the necessary firman for that purpose Your Excellency sent to Signor Logothetis before my departure, and which he has never received. Everything that has been done up till now in the citadel has been by means of presents to the Dizdar, who is the commandant. And he has just told us that henceforth it is impossible for us to work without a firman. I therefore beg Your Excellency to have one sent to us as soon as possible. Your faithful servant, Giovanni Luisieri.
Well, my lord, it seems that the Grand Pasha, the Grand Vizier, and all the fine folk of Constantinople have turned out to welcome you.
This was because on the 17th of June 1801, the British expedition in Egypt was finally a success as the French in Cairo surrendered to General Hutchinson. The Ottoman Empire was now safe from Napoleon, and Lord Elgin's esteem greatly enhanced in the eyes of the Sultan and all the Turks. This British victory was joyfully celebrated in Constantinople. So Elgin's timing for seeking permission from the Turks to go onto the Acropolis was perfect. For only 3 weeks after the British victory in Egypt, a permit, or as the Turks called it, a firman, was being signed by the Kaimakam Pasha. It was quickly taken to the British embassy and translated.
Finalmente, è finito.
Oh, bravo, Signor Pisani. Bravo. Listen, my lord. This is just what we need. My desire is that on the arrival of this letter, you use your diligence to act conformably to the instances of His Excellency Lord Elgin, as long as he remains in the said citadel of Athens, or in fixing scaffolding around the ancient temple of the idols, or in the moulding with chalk or gypsum the said ornaments and visible figures thereon, or in measuring the fragments and vestiges of other ruined edifices, or in the rubbish. That they may not be molested by the said Dizdar, or commandant of the citadel, no one meddle with their scaffolding or implements, nor hinder them from taking away any pieces of stone with inscriptions or figures. In the above-mentioned manner, see that ye demean and comport yourselves. Signed, Abdullah Kaimakam.
With the precious firman in his baggage, the Reverend Hunt immediately set sail from Turkey to Greece.
The nights were so calm and the moon so bright that a young lieutenant made a concert as we sailed along. Then we steered towards Piraeus. Here the wind entirely failed us, and at night it was so dead calm that there was not even a steersman at the helm nor a sailor on the lookout. Luckily, the captain happened to come on deck at midnight and saw a vessel rowing towards us. In a moment, all was bustle. We cleared for action, distributed muskets, and concealed ourselves till the vessel came within hail. The speaking trumpet was given to me, as English is supposed to have more effect on the nerves of a pirate than lingua franca.
Ahoy! Ahoy! Can you tell us who you are?
On receiving no answer, he fired a shot. This rattling about them produced a reply that they were Hedriots.
We allow neither friend nor foe to approach us at night.
Having arrived safely at Athens without further incident, I called on the voivode and presented the firman. When he had read it and perceived the determined tone with which we spoke, he became submissive in the extremest degree, and assured us he was highly mortified to find that the Dizdar had presumed to treat an Englishman with disrespect, or demand money on any pretext. The conference ended with the repeated assurances that henceforth the gates of the citadel are open to all Englishmen, from sunrise to sunset.
My first aim is to finish the great work well, and I dare to flatter myself that by the means which we now have, there will be nothing that will not be brought to a satisfactory conclusion. Besides the general work, it would be very essential that the moulders should be able to take away exact models of little ornaments or detached pieces, if any are found.
So at this stage, it seems clear that Elgin did not think he had obtained permission to remove sculptures from the temples.
To be able to take away exact models of little ornaments or detached pieces, if any are found.
Right, now we come to the crucial part. The point I'm trying to make here is that the firman gave them permission to take drawings and mouldings which Hunt, driven by ambition, wildly overinterpreted.
It was still Elgin's responsibility.
Yes, of course it was, but it doesn't really matter what the permit says. I mean, there'd be no defence at all to a charge of burglary to say that you had written permission from someone who just happened to be squatting in the house at the time.
That is a completely unfair analogy. No, I'm sorry. Rightly or wrongly, the Turks governed Greece. You might just well say that anything bought in Italy before 1859 had to go back because Italy was governed by Vienna and Madrid.
Right, art is international. And
That's not the point. As far as we can see, the permit gave permission to erect scaffolding, to take mouldings and sketches, and at the most, bits and pieces excavated from around the Parthenon. Anyway, Elgin still damaged one of the most beautiful buildings in the world. He did do it. No one disputes that.
No, no one disputes it. He certainly did do it. And so did the Venetian General Morosini, who blew it up. And what about the Turks, who were grinding up all the carvings for mortar?
Yes, all right, Richard, all right. We haven't really got all night to do this, you know. Now, what I've done is to cut together the modern stuff I did on the Erexium, and I've written some more dialogue. So we start with the Elgin Hunt scene inside the British Embassy at Constantinople.
Ah, now, my lord. You see these caryatids that support the ornamental frieze and ceiling? They are open to the day. If you could command a large man of war here, I believe we could transport this entire example of ancient art wholly back to England.
Sadly, it is impossible. We do not have battleships at our beck and call.
Well then, we shall just have to take a column. Now, I think this one here seems to be the best example.
The Erexium, as it is today. After 2,500 years, this building is receiving the treatment its intrinsic beauty demands. Unfortunately, a supporting column is missing. It was removed by Elgin and now stands in the British Museum. When Elgin removed the caryatid, he not only destroyed the symmetry of the front with a square column, but threatened the whole edifice. As part of the restoration work, the Greek government requested the British Museum to send a cast of the Elgin column in their possession. This they were pleased to do. It duly arrived, together with a bill for over £30,000.
they must have loved that.
Has anyone been to see the column in the British Museum?
I have. It was a great deal better preserved than the ones he left behind.
Maybe, but I don't think Lord Elgin took it because he was worried about pollution. Okay, let's get on with the Parthenon historical stuff. Right, stand by, Richard.
Today, the ship's carpenter and 5 of the crew mounted the walls of the temple of the Parthenon, and by the aid of windlasses, cordage, and 20 Greeks, they succeeded in detaching and lowering down, without the slightest accident, one of the statues or groups in the metopes representing a combat between a youth and a centaur. It has long been the admiration of the world. Indeed, nothing could equal it for beauty and grace. A second, which adjoins it on the same subject, is to follow it tomorrow. On digging to a considerable depth, we found certain sculptures. The most beautiful of the statues is now in the consul's yard. The other will follow tonight. Logothetis, the British consul, is somewhat timid. He does not enter enthusiastically with the idea of taking the sculptures from the Parthenon, and he ventured to hint that the Voivode dare us not extend the firman to such a point. The second metope is now lowered with equal success. When I saw those beautiful statues hanging in the air and depending on some old rope, I was seized with a trembling and palpitation which only ceased when they arrived safe to the ground.
I hope that no further difficulties will be raised as to the continuation of the digging at the Temple of the Parthenon, and I shall be able to get possession of all the fragments I find. Mr. Hunt wrote to Your Excellency on my behalf to send a dozen marble saws of different sizes to Athens as quickly as possible. I should require 3 or 4 to saw a great bas relief, the central slab of the east frieze, that we could not transport unless we reduce its weight.
And this is how Lord Elgin replied.
I venture to flatter myself that my purpose will be attained in a fashion to put the names of my artists on an elevation that no one has approached since the time of the originals. I hope that some English ships will soon be at Athens with orders to take on board what you will have got. I name very specially the Temple of Erechtheion. I flatter myself that you have already thought of ways of transporting it. If the means that Mr. Hamilton would have supplied is with you, such as levers and so forth, perhaps you could get down the statues one after the other and put them on my brig, the Mentor. I would wish to have, of the Acropolis, examples in the actual object of each thing, an architectural ornament, of each cornice, each frieze, architectural orders, and of the variant forms of the orders, of metopes and the like, as much as possible. P.S. I have the sores. Dr. Scott sent you a fresh supply of medicine. Okay, everybody. Tea break over. Now, I want to record the soundtrack to the critical views of Elgin's contemporaries. That's Dodwell and Byron. If you could lead in, Dimitri.
Elgin's defenders, or apologists, often claimed that in his time there was a different view of antiquities, and we ought not to judge him by our own standards. But hear what the painter and gentleman traveler Edward Dodwell had to say at the time.
During my first tour of Greece, I had the inexpressible mortification of being present when the Parthenon was despoiled of its finest sculpture, when some of its architectural members were thrown to the ground. Several metopi were fixed in between triglyphs as in a groove, and in order to lift them up, it was necessary to throw down the magnificent cornice by which they were covered. The southeast angle of the pediment shared the same fate, and instead of the picturesque beauty and high preservation in which I first saw it, it is now comparatively reduced to a state of shattered dissolution. It is painful to reflect that these trophies of human genius, which had resisted the silent decay of time during a period of more than 22 centuries, which had escaped the destructive force of the iconoclasts, the rapacity of the Venetians, and the barbarous violence of the Mohammedans, should at last have been doomed to devastation. The Athenian temples, instead of remaining in their original places as the property of all nations, will be appropriated by the strongest. It is indeed impossible to suppress the feelings of regret which must arise in the breast of every traveler who has seen these temples before and since their late dilapidation. Nor have I any hesitation in declaring that the Athenians in general, nay, the Turks themselves, did lament the ruin that was committed.
And finally, the most eloquent condemnation of all, Lord Byron.
Quod non fecerunt Gotti, hoc fecerunt Scotti.
It's okay, Dave. Hang on.
What on earth does that mean?
What the Goth did not do was done here by a Scot.
Okay. Good. In your own time.
Cold as the crags upon his native coast, his mind is barren, and his heart is hard. Is he whose head conceived, whose hand prepared, ought to displace Athena's poor remains. Her sons too weak the sacred shrines to guard, yet felt some portion of their mother's pains, and never knew till then the weight of despots' chains. Cold is the heart, fair Greece, that looks on thee nor feels as lovers o'er the dust they love. Dull is the eye that will not weep to see thy walls defaced, thy mouldering shrines removed by British hands, which it had best behoved to guard those relics, ne'er to be restored.
On the 20th of March, 1802, Lord Elgin, with his family, left Constantinople for Athens, where he was greeted by the British consul. At last, he could see the Parthenon with his own eyes. 6 months earlier, a peace treaty had been signed between France and Turkey, which meant that Louis Fauvel, the French consul and collector of antiquities, would soon arrive back on the Athens scene to follow his pursuits. Time was running out for Lord Elgin.
I don't name Athens and my artists. It would be sacrilege to speak hastily of such wonders, and the justice done to them. All I can say is to express a belief that the object has been attained, and that when all arrive safe in England, I shall be able to show a complete representation of Athens.
I think the few things that remain far more beautiful than ever I dared imagine. We got down the last thing we want from the Acropolis, so now we may boldly bid defiance to our enemies.
The Elgins then left Athens for Corinth and the Peloponnese to look for more antiquities, leaving their children in Athens with Louisieri.
I'm sending back by boat some vases and inscriptions presented to me at Corinth, and an Ionic capital which I saw near a little Greek church in the coast where we dined. The monuments never seem to have been taken. It would be necessary to take a couple of saws for the finds. A little further is an enormous triglyph, good to measure, or to take. Undoubtedly, sculptures, etc., will be found. If you started early in the morning, on Sunday, for instance, examine everything and return the same evening. It would also be necessary to have the Daphne columns, or at least the capitals. When you see them, you will make up your mind. In either case, have them ready at Piraeus. I recommend the Acropolis to you.
Like many travelers to Greece in those days, Elgin took with him a translation of Pausanias' Guide to Greece. Although written during the 2nd century AD, it was still a useful comment on the ancient sites.
I hear that French frigates will soon be coming into the archipelago. Every moment is therefore very precious in acquiring our acquisitions. Adieu, keep well, and take good care of my dear little children.
Your children, my lord, are quite well. They are taking walks, they are always playful, and I'm delighted to receive their caresses. I hope this evening to get the 3rd bas relief of the Temple of Victory into the store, and the 4th tomorrow. Preparations are going forward for the pediment of the Parthenon.
On the 6th of May, the Elgins left Corinth and traveled 6 hours to the Temple of Jupiter in Emea. After spending the night in tents among the ruins, they continued south towards Argos.
We had got from a neighboring village some horses and asses. You would have laughed had you seen the party. After 6 more tedious hours scrambling over the mountains, we pursued our road. The valleys and sides of the hills are covered with myrtles and other evergreens. On entering the great plain of Argos, we made about half an hour's deviation to the left to see the ruins of the city of Mycenae. Great masses of the walls of the ancient citadel still remain. They are said to be the work of the Cyclops.
The Reverend Philip Hunt had visited Mycenae before and wrote this letter to Lord Elgin about the possible acquisition of the Lion's Gate.
No description, my lord, can convey an adequate idea of the massive stones which compose its walls, as well as of the 2 colossal lions in bas-relief over the gateway, which still remain in their original situation. Alas, I fear the block on which they are sculptured is too gigantic and too distant from the sea to give any hopes of being able to obtain so renowned a monument.
My lord, this is the tomb of Agamemnon.
Is it possible to go through there?
Πυρσοφόρη, δείξτε το δρόμο στο Lord Elgin.
At a short distance from these ruins is a stupendous vault, which is supposed by some to be the tomb of Agamemnon. The former vault is that of an immense hollowed sugar loaf and composed of hewn stones. We then crept through a subterranean passage into another dome of much ruder work. We followed a guide, and I saw that the bristles on his skull were erect as we crawled into this second vault.
Before leaving Mycenae, Lord Elgin gave instructions to start digging for antiquities straight away. And on the 15th of May, the party returned to Athens. 4 days later, Lord Elgin left for a tour of Boeotia, leaving his wife to arrange the transport of the marbles from Piraeus.
What's happening here, Captain Richards? Why is nobody working?
Milady, the ship is entirely loaded.
I think you better go and see what more you can do.
At once, milady.
I'm sure we can fit this one in, can't we?
Well, milady,
And what about this one?
I think there may be room in the hold.
Good. I sent a very civil message to the captain saying I was sorry to hear he was so ill. I then coaxed over the lieutenant to take the 3 large cases which you saw in the magazine. Now for some news that will please you. I have got another large case packed up this day, a long piece at the Temple of Parthenon. Also, I have got on board 4 immense, heavy, long packages, and tomorrow the horse's head is to be carefully packed up and sent on board. The last 2 cases are entirely my doing, and I feel proud, Elgin. And now I have pushed Louisieri to get cases made for these last 3 packages. I am now satisfied of what I have always thought, which is how much more women can do if they set about it than men. I will lay any bet that had you been here, you would not have got half as much on board as I have.
The Elgin family left Greece for Constantinople, while Lord Elgin's own ship, the Mentor, arrived at Piraeus with Hamilton from a mission in Egypt. Among the antiquities being loaded, there were some marble horses from the Parthenon frieze.
I'm not sure that this is the right section of the frieze. Yes, please. Look at here. But has that bit of the arm always been missing? Oh, yes.
Horses!
Unloading at the same time, there were some live horses. One as a present for the voivode, and the rest for Elgin's own use.
Yesterday morning, I gave the captain the note of the 17 cases which I have shipped on board your brig and which he is taking on this voyage to Malta. He takes a letter on behalf of your excellency that he should take all possible care of them as works that cannot be replaced in all the world.
Bon voyage.
This morning early, with a favorable wind, the brig set sail and disappeared in a moment.
On the morning of 16th September 1802, a violent northwest wind forced Lord Elgin's ship off course to the island of Serigo, the southernmost point of the Peloponnese. The ship then smashed onto the rocks and sank.
Dearest Mother, our minds are so occupied with the sad piece of news we have received, we can think and talk of nothing else. Our ship, the Mentor, going from Athens to Malta, laden with a quantity of our Athens antiquities, alas, your chair and father's column, is gone to the bottom, attempting to get into the harbor of Serigo. All the people are saved. Poor Hamilton was on board. We're expecting to hear from him every moment. The men say he escaped without his hat or shoes, and all his papers are lost. It was a most violent storm. What a dreadful stroke this is.
Be careful of this.
Those are my boots. Thank you very much. My drowned boots. Thank you very much. Faristo.
Constantinople, October the 25th, 1802. To the British Vice Consul at Cerigo. A report having reached me that my English brig, the Mentor, has foundered in attempting to enter the port of Cerigo, I hereby request that you will afford every profitable assistance for the recovery of the said vessel and her cargo. She had on board a quantity of boxes with stones of no value of themselves, but of great consequence for me to secure. The bearer, Pietro Gavallo, proceeds to Cerigo for the purpose of estimating the loss and with direction to obtain any additional aid that may be wanted. Elgin, His Britannic Majesty's Ambassador Extraordinary at the Sublime Ottoman Porte.
Pietro, give my regards to Mr. Hamilton. Without delay.
Yes, my lord.
An express has reached me from Hamilton at Cerigo. It leaves me much satisfaction to think how great the possibility is of recovering both the cargo and the brig herself, and that most of our unfortunate friend Hamilton's difficulties and sufferings will be ceased by Captain Richard's arrival. Mr. Hamilton's servant, Pietro Gavallo, reached Cerigo on the 18th. But I am sorry to add that he seems to have disgusted every person to whom he addressed himself in his new commission. Captain Richards has been offended beyond conception by his seating himself at his side and speaking in a tone of more than familiarity. His conduct has been similar throughout.
I had indeed, my lord, hoped before this to have given you a more satisfactory account of the Mentor and her marbles, as the arrival of Captain Richards promised such good success. The weather during his stay was very favorable, and if he had had the assistance of another vessel of equal force, I cannot doubt that he would have succeeded. But after 13 days, he could no longer delay his voyage to Malta. This indeed was very provoking. However, to make the best of it, I have engaged the captain of the other boat, who is brother-in-law to the vice-consul, to do his utmost, so that the main hatches being enlarged, the divers may be able to get out in a few days the remaining cases. The reason that the divers are now at a standstill is, I believe, that the case which is now nearest to the hatches, and of course the first to come out, is a very long one, containing, I suppose, one half of the bas-relief taken from the south wall of the Acropolis, and which broke in two as they were carrying it down. The season is very much against us, particularly the cold, which will soon prevent them diving any longer, and they tell me they must give it up on the 18th of this month. Captain Richards has given me the pleasing hope of seeing your lordship and Lady Elgin on your return home towards the close of this month. Never did an unfortunate prisoner look with more anxiety for the happy moment of his release than I for that day on which I may escape from this wretched island.
On the 16th of January, 1803, Lord Elgin and his family left Constantinople as his tenure as ambassador had come to a close. In 2 weeks' time, they were all embarking from Piraeus on the second part of their journey home.
We left Athens on the 2nd of February, and you will be happy to hear that we have brought away all the artists. Only Louisieri is left to finish his drawings. Fauvel, the French consul, has returned to Athens, but now he can do us no harm. From Athens, we sailed to Cerigo and saw the remains of the poor, unfortunate mentor. The weather was dreadful, and it was impossible attempting anything.
Two years later, Louisieri, who was still working in Greece for Lord Elgin, wrote to Hamilton, who was now back in England.
I have the satisfaction to inform you that at last all the marbles at Cerigo have been recovered. I confess, however, that I live in a state of uneasiness, seeing that both those and these here that are even better and ready for shipment are still in these barbarous shores. Sadly, I've had no direct news from his lordship since September of last year. Your old friend, Giovanni Louisieri.
Once all the marbles had been recovered from the wreck by the divers, they were stored on the beach at Cerigo. However, the Elgins, while crossing France on their way home, had fallen victim to a Napoleonic decree as all British subjects of military age in France were to be arrested. Despite being under surveillance, Lord Elgin managed to contact his old friend, Lord Nelson, to ask him to recover the cases of antiquities on the island.
From HMS Victory at Sea, 2nd September 1804. Sir, Lord Elgin, having requested that I would allow a ship to call at Cerigo to bring from thence to Malta some marble antiquities. And as I am perfectly disposed to meet his lordship's wishes, I am to desire you will send transport to Cerigo with the first convoy going up the Levant. If it is intended to send them on to England, you will give the necessary orders accordingly. I am, etc., etc., Nelson and Bronte.
Well done, everyone. You're finished.
They are beautiful.
Well, they've been even more beautiful in situ.
They wouldn't be in that state if they'd been left where they were. Anyway, if the marbles do go back to Greece, they're going into a museum. They won't go back up on the temple.
Well, none of it did Elgin much good. I mean, he caught a disease that made his nose decay, and his wife took off with maximum scandal.
Poor chap.
He didn't stop there. Remember, the government wouldn't buy the marbles for years, and even then they only gave him half what they cost him, £35,000.
So by today's standards, he must have lost nearly £1 million.
Will they ever go back?
I doubt it.
What do you think, Dimitri?
Well, you remember what that old man from Joannina said, the one Hobhouse quotes. Εσείς οι Άγγλοι, αρπάζετε τα έργα των προγόνων μας. Φυλάξτε τα καλά. Έλληνες θα έρθουν και θα τα ξαναπάρουν πίσω. You English are carrying off the works of the Greeks, our forefathers. Preserve them well. The Greeks will come and redeem them.
She had on board a quantity of boxes with stones of no value, of themselves, but of great consequence for me to secure.